The night sky over the colony world of Epsilon 9 burned. Smoke curled from the shattered domes of the outpost, twisting into the thin atmosphere like ghosts fleeing the dead. The Galactic Empire's soldiers moved through the ruins with methodical indifference, their polished armor reflecting the embers of the homes they had torched. One family, human settlers, unarmed, had been dragged into the square. The father had shouted something about Earth sovereignty. The Imperial officer hadn't even looked at him before firing. The mother died next. The child last. The footage reached Earth 12 hours later. Grainy, blood-streaked, and undeniable. In a secure bunker beneath Geneva, two figures watched the transmission in silence. Elias Varric, a man with hands that had known both a surgeon's precision and a killer's ruthlessness, didn't flinch as the child's body hit the ground. But his wife, Lyra, exhaled, slow, controlled, and the sound was sharper than any curse. Her dark eyes, usually alive with calculated amusement, were flat. Dead. They'll call it an accident, she said. A tragic misunderstanding. Elias tapped the screen, freezing the image. The Imperial officer's face, smug beneath his helmet's visor, filled the frame. This one won't. They weren't supposed to exist anymore. Officially, the Blackthorn program, Earth's answer to the Empire's assassins, had been disbanded after the last war. Unofficially, its assets had been kept on retainer. Quietly. Deniably. Elias and Lyra had been married 6 years, long enough to know each other's tells, each other's limits. But this? This was different. The summons came at dawn. No names, no records. Just coordinates. The room they entered was sterile, lit by the cold glow of holograms displaying Imperial troop movements. A general, no insignia, no introduction, gestured to the footage still looping on the central display. You've seen it. Not a question. Lyra crossed her arms. We have. Earth can't retaliate openly. Not yet. The general's voice was gravel wrapped in silk. But we can send a message. Elias leaned forward. How loud? The holograms shifted, resolving into the shimmering image of an orbital palace, the Imperial family's summer retreat. The Emperor's youngest son hosted the officer who gave the order. 3 days ago. Celebrated him. A pause. We want the entire bloodline. No survivors. Lyra's lips curled. Not a smile. A baring of teeth. You don't want soldiers. You want butchers. The general met her gaze. We want professionals. Elias studied the schematics. The palace was a fortress, all durasteel and automated defenses. But every fortress had cracks. Disguises? Diplomatic envoys from the Cygnus Federation. They're neutral enough to get you close. Lyra tapped a fingernail against her arm. An extraction. The general hesitated, just a fraction too long. We'll have a ship standing by. Elias didn't need to glance at his wife to know they'd both caught the lie. Deniable assets didn't get extraction plans. They got silence. Lyra stood. We'll need modifications. Neural suppressants to bypass their bioscans. And a vial of Tyrannis 7. The general stiffened. Tyrannis 7 was a neurotoxin. Odorless. Untraceable. And excruciating. That's professional, Elias finished. They left without another word. In the corridor, Lyra's hand brushed his, a fleeting contact, but Elias felt the tremor in her fingers. Not fear. Fury. Last time we did this, she murmured, we swore we were done. Elias watched the elevator doors slide shut. The reflection staring back at him was a stranger's. We were. The doors opened. Somewhere above them, the sky was still blue. For now. The Imperial shuttle descended through the atmosphere of Vorixis Prime, its polished hull reflecting the sickly violet glow of the gas giant looming in the sky. Inside, Elias adjusted the high-collared robes of a Cygnus diplomat, the fabric stiff with hidden armor. Lyra sat beside him, her face transformed by subtle biosculpting, cheekbones sharper, lips fuller, a stranger's cold beauty. Only her eyes remained unchanged, dark and calculating as they studied the orbital palace through the viewport. Remember, Elias murmured, his voice lost beneath the hum of the engines, we're here to flatter, not threaten. Lyra's smile was a razor. I know how to play a sycophant. The shuttle docked with a hiss of pressurized seals. The ramp lowered, and they stepped into the gilded nightmare of the Imperial court. The palace was a monument to excess, walls lined with living crystal that pulsed in time with unseen music, floors so polished they mirrored the sneers of passing nobles. The air smelled of spiced wine and something darker, metallic. Blood, perhaps. Recent. A functionary in silver livery bowed. Ambassadors. His Radiance, Prince Velis, is honored by your presence. Lyra's laugh was light, practiced. The honor is ours. They were led through halls lined with statues of conquered species, their faces frozen in silent screams. Elias kept his expression neutral, but his fingers twitched toward the hidden compartment in his sleeve, the one holding the vial of Tyranni's 7. The prince awaited them in a sun-drenched atrium, lounging on a divan of woven shimmer silk. He was young, barely out of adolescence, with the delicate features of the imperial bloodline and the bored cruelty of a predator with no challenges left. At his feet, a servant knelt, trembling, a fresh bruise darkening his temple. Ah, the Cygnus delegation. Velis didn't rise. His voice was a lazy drawl. Tell me, what does your federation want this time? Lyra stepped forward, her every movement a performance. Only to admire your greatness, your radiance. She offered a jeweled box, a gift laced with surveillance nanits. A token of our esteem. Velis flicked the box open with one manicured finger. Inside, a gemstone pulsed with hypnotic light. His lips curled. Pretty. But I prefer living toys. His gaze slid to the cowering servant. This one's voice irritates me. Silence it. A guard stepped forward, blade unsheathed. Elias moved before he could think. Your radiance, he interjected, smooth as poisoned wine, perhaps a demonstration of our other gifts. He nodded to Lyra. She understood. With a flick of her wrist, she produced a holographic projector, flooding the room with swirling constellations, a distraction. The guard hesitated. The servant scrambled back. Velis laughed, delighted. Oh, I like you. He rose, circling them like a collector inspecting new specimens. Stay. Entertain me. It was an invitation. A trap. Both. That night, in the chambers graciously provided to them, Elias disabled the surveillance bugs with a pulse from his neural implant. Lyra stripped off her gown, revealing the weapon grafts beneath her skin. The prince is worse than the reports, she muttered. He'll kill that servant by dawn. Elias checked the charge on his plasma cutter. We move tomorrow. During the feast. Lyra paused. You saw the security. The second we act, the entire palace locks down. Unless someone disables the shields from the inside. He met her gaze. I'll take the control room. You handle the royals. A beat of silence. Then Lyra's smirk returned. Always giving me the fun part. They didn't speak of the unspoken truth, there was no extraction. No backup. Just the mission. And the dead human child on Epsilon 9, whose face neither of them could forget. The feast was a grotesque spectacle. Dozens of courses, each more extravagant than the last, served on plates of fused bone. Prince Velis held court at the head of the table, his laughter ringing like broken glass. Lyra, resplendent in stolen jewels, leaned close to him. Your radiance, she purred, I've heard so much about your appetites. Velis's eyes gleamed. Oh? She pressed a goblet into his hand. Let me show you mine. Across the room, Elias slipped away, unnoticed. The palace awaited. And so did vengeance. The palace's control room hummed with the low, rhythmic pulse of energy shields. Elias moved like a shadow between the consoles, his fingers dancing across the interfaces with surgical precision. The guards stationed there never saw the blade that slit their throats, only the darkness that swallowed them whole. One by one, the security feeds flickered and died. Meanwhile, in the banquet hall, Lyra's laughter was a weapon. She had Prince Velis's full attention now, his pupils dilated with the poison seeping into his veins. He didn't notice the way her fingers lingered just a second too long on his wrist, didn't see the nanite slipping into his bloodstream. His smile was slack, his voice slurred. You're different from the others, he murmured, leaning too close. Lyra's grin was a promise of ruin. You have no idea. The first scream echoed from the far end of the table. A noble clutched his throat, foam bubbling between his lips. Then another. And another. The Tyranni's 7 worked fast. Panic erupted. Chairs toppled. Wine splashed like blood across the marble floor. Velis staggered to his feet, his face draining of color as the toxin reached his heart. What? His gaze locked onto Lyra, realization dawning too late. She didn't flinch. This is for Epsilon 9. The prince collapsed, his body convulsing. Around him, the imperial court fell like cut strings. Alarms blared. The shields were down. Elias's voice crackled in Lyra's earpiece. 30 seconds. Move, She didn't waste time. The hall's grand doors burst open as royal guards stormed in, pulse rifles raised. Lyra was already moving, her stolen jewels scattering as she ducked behind an overturned table. The air sizzled with gunfire. She returned it with a wrist-mounted plasma shot that took out 3 men in a single burst. Somewhere in the chaos, a child's face flashed in her mind, the one from the footage. Small. Broken. She fired again. Elias met her at the rendezvous point, his robes torn, his knuckles bloody. The Emperor's wing is sealed. Heavy resistance. Lyra ejected a spent cartridge. Then we go through them. They fought back to back, a dance perfected over years of violence. Elias's strikes were efficient, brutal. Lyra's were elegant, lethal. The holes narrowed, the air thick with smoke and the metallic tang of ion discharges. Then, the throne room. The Emperor was ancient, his skeletal frame draped in robes of state, his milky eyes unblinking. He didn't rise as they entered. Didn't call for help. He simply smiled. Ah, he croaked. The beasts of earth. Elias raised his weapon. The Emperor laughed, a sound like dry leaves crumbling. Do you think this changes anything? You slaughter my family. I'll slaughter yours. 1,000 Epsilon 9s. 1,000,000. Lyra's finger tightened on the trigger. The old man spread his arms. You came here to kill monsters. Look in the mirror. For a heartbeat, the room was silent. Then the shot rang out. The Emperor slumped, his smile still etched into his withered face. Elias exhaled. We're done. The palace shuddered around them, reinforcements, or maybe the self-destruct sequence. It didn't matter. They ran. The hangar was chaos, guards scrambling to intercept them. Lyra took a pulse round to the shoulder, biting back a scream as the heat seared through muscle. Elias dragged her forward, their ship so close. A blast sent them sprawling. The shuttle's ramp was sealed. No extraction. Lyra coughed blood. Well. This is ironic. Elias hauled her up. Not yet. He jammed his access codes into a nearby fighter, overriding the lock. The engines screamed to life as the hangar doors groaned, beginning to close. They shot through the gap just as the palace exploded behind them, a fireball swallowing the last of the Imperial bloodline. Silence. Then the static of an open comm. Earth vessel, this is Cygnus Patrol. Identify yourselves. Elias and Lyra exchanged a glance. He reached for the transmitter. Then stopped. Lyra flicked the comm off. Let them wonder. The stars stretched before them, infinite and cold. Somewhere, a new hunt would begin. But not tonight. Tonight, they vanished. The stolen Imperial fighter streaked through the void, its engines burning hotter than vengeance. Lyra slumped in the co-pilot seat, her fingers pressed to the cauterized wound in her shoulder. The scent of scorched flesh mixed with the metallic tang of the ship's recycled air. Elias watched the star charts flicker across the console, their stolen vessel's navigation system pinging every hidden outpost in the sector. We've got 3 hours before they trace the ion trail, he said. His voice was calm, but his knuckles were white on the controls. Lyra exhaled through her teeth. Plenty of time to bleed out, then. A warning light flashed, an incoming transmission, encrypted. Earth's signature. Elias killed the feed. Lyra arched a brow. Not even curious. We're deniable assets, he said. That message isn't congratulations. She knew he was right. They'd completed the mission, but the rules were clear, no witnesses, no loose ends. The Blackthorn program had taught them that much. The fighter shuddered as it hit the outer edges of a debris field, the graveyard of some forgotten battle. Elias wove through the wreckage, his movements precise. Lyra recognized the tactic, he was hiding their trail. Where are we going? She asked. Elias didn't answer at first. Then, quietly, somewhere they won't look. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of what they'd done. The dead Emperor's words echoed in Lyra's skull. Look in the mirror. She flexed her uninjured hand, studying the blood caked under her nails. Do you think it mattered? Elias's jaw tightened. The Empire will replace him. There's always another tyrant. That's not what I meant. He glanced at her, then. Really looked. The dim cockpit lights carved hollows under his eyes, making him seem older, wearier. It mattered to us, he said. Lyra leaned back, closing her eyes. That was the truth, wasn't it? They hadn't changed the galaxy. They'd just drawn a line in the sand. A proximity alert blared. Elias cursed, hands flying over the controls. We've got company. On the scanner, 3 Imperial interceptors dropped out of warp, their weapons hot. Lyra forced herself upright, biting back a groan. Persistent bastards. Elias threw the fighter into a dive, skimming the hull of a derelict cruiser. Can you shoot? She bared her teeth. Try and stop me. The interceptors opened fire. The next minutes were a blur of evasive maneuvers, the ship groaning under the strain. Lyra manned the guns, her vision swimming with pain as she locked onto the lead interceptor. 1 shot. 2. The third struck true, and the enemy vessel erupted in a silent bloom of flame. 2 left. Elias spun the fighter into a tight roll, narrowly avoiding a missile. We can't outrun them. Lyra's mind raced. Then, an idea. The cruiser, she said. Its core might still be active. Elias understood immediately. A risk. A stupid one. He did it anyway. The fighter streaked toward the derelict's exposed reactor, the interceptors in pursuit. At the last second, Elias pulled up, skimming the surface. The Imperials weren't as quick. Their ships collided with the unstable core, triggering a chain reaction. The explosion lit up the void. Their own ship rocked, alarms screaming. Elias fought the controls as the hull buckled. Brace. They hit the debris field hard, the fighter's nose crumpling on impact. Smoke filled the cockpit. Silence. Then, Lyra's laughter, raw and breathless. We're alive. Elias slumped in his seat, adrenaline bleeding away. For now. Outside, the wreckage of their pursuers drifted, embers cooling in the dark. Lyra reached for his hand. What now? He interlaced their fingers, blood and all. We disappear. The stars stretched on, endless. Somewhere, the Empire would be hunting. Somewhere, Earth would be denying. But here, in the ruins of battle, there was only this: 2 killers, a stolen ship, and the ghost of a dead child who had started it all. They jumped to warp.